This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, I am back here in the very fine studios of Pod Populi, Podcast for the People. I'm at the one in Boca Raton, Florida again. And as you know, Boca Raton means rat's mouth. Not good. They need to change that. A lot of people say that this podcast purpose for a long, long time was to make people laugh. And I think that's probably right. I think our goal is always to make people laugh because laughter is a reaction and we like it and it's validating and all those kind of things. But really, even harder to do, and more importantly to this podcast and probably every conversation that I try and have, is we try to make people think. And I've been thinking about thinking a lot, talk about meta on that recently. And I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking too much about this. I need to bring in somebody who probably has a lot more expertise in this than me. She is the host of the Food for Thought podcast. I was very fortunate enough to be on her podcast recently. It's a good podcast. Check it out. Food for Thought. The lovely Ashley Gersh. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on, Brian. I'm excited to be here.
Do you think as peoples, do we tend to overthink things, underthink things, or think just the right amount and it balances itself out?
I think naturally people more so lean on the side of overthinking things.
You say that, and then we order an appetizer without even thinking about it. I don't even know. This show is about love, dating, relationships. I think you're right. I think we overthink things, and you can sort of either qualify that or justify that by saying, well, these are important decisions that we're making, but we are taking the minutia of the process, whether it's the first date or the relationship, and we are going down this rabbit hole that sometimes we can't see the light out of the rabbit hole anymore.
Mm-hmm. People tend to overthink instead of trusting themselves. So it's a lot about...
Well, how can we trust ourselves? Like the answer is like overthink or trust yourselves. Ooh, I'll choose overthink.
So you don't trust yourself, Brian?
Well, I mean, I don't think any of us trusting, because if we're still out there dating or in a relationship or whatever, we're like, ooh, how can I trust it? Because, I've controversially brought up on this podcast before that when people say, oh, I trust your gut, my gut's always right. No, it's deja vu. It's revisionist history. Your gut in the moment said, go out with them. So your gut was lying to you. Overthinking things. One of the first things I ever said on this show was the women look for red flags and the men look for green lights. Okay? I stand by that. Looking for red flags is probably overthinking. Mm-hmm. Looking for green lights is probably underthinking. And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, where you're cautiously optimistic, I think, is probably the proper balance when it comes to either finding a new relationship or being in a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I think all of that does stem from not trusting oneself. So like if you have put in the work to really understand your emotions as they inform you, right? Because anxiety is just informing us that there's a threat. But anxiety changes if we change the way that we relate to anxiety. So
is anxiety informing us that there's a threat, or is anxiety imagining that there's a threat?
It's informing us whether it's real or perceived. The body won't know.
Well, that's no
difference.
help. The value is in perceiving what is a real threat and what is a non-real threat. It's like it doesn't. I think that matters.
It does, and that comes from understanding what's happening in the body with each situation, right? Because if you're in an environment that you're constantly anxious in, you are going to continuously be re-triggered. So you don't want to be in those environments. So if you are constantly re-triggered while dating, mm-hmm. that's something to get curious about.
As to why?
Right? Like if you're, why? Why does anxiety keep showing up?
Is it the unknown? Is it the situation? Is it being out in public with other people? Is it how you feel about your hair? Is it, oh my God, how's this person going to hurt me? There's probably all of those things.
I think it's all of them.
And one alone is probably grounds for overthinking in itself. But when you start to layer those together, especially when early on in dating, what do I wear? Does he like me? Does she like me? Why did you go? All of it is you're thinking about things because the answers don't come quickly. How does this person feel about me? What does this mean? What are we doing? Those are not easy answers to come by even in the middle of a conversation with two people about it.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people take themselves really seriously on first dates. And for first dates, I'd recommend like not taking yourself as seriously, because people tend to fall for potential or ideas of who someone is when you really want the person to show you who they are. And you probably won't see that on the first date. You might have an idea, but over time, that's when you can see, is this a relationship that can be built, or are you just hoping for them to become someone that they're not?
Right. That, which is also a thing. We tend to project who they can be.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
And we tend to do that. Women tend to be like, fast forward a long way over the appetizer. They're like, well, how will he be as a father? What should we name our children? And that's not really about assessing him. It's assessing a version of him that may not exist now, isn't relevant now, and may change by the time you fall in love altogether. Rather than, is this, the first thing you should think about during the course of a date or early on in a relationship is, do I want to see this person again? Just start there.
Yeah.
Not, do I see myself with this person for 10 or 15 years? It's just one step in front of the other, kick the can down the road.
I don't think it's bad to be thinking that, because it's okay to have needs. It's okay to have standards and to know what you want. If you want something serious opposed to casual, it's probably a good thing to know that closer to the beginning.
I agree with that, but that is overthinking. Because people who say, I just want something casual, are only saying so because they're afraid to get hurt. They say that means I don't want to put my emotions involved in this. But realistically, if they could trust the situation, everybody wants something serious. Everybody hopes that this person they're out casually with, they fall in love. They deep down want that. People are like, oh, why would you have a one night stand? Well, you hope for a second night. You're trying, you want it to go again. You hope to like them. Everybody, the people are like, I don't want to get anything serious. Those people have not done the reparations from the prior relationship, and they're not ready. And that is the overthinking that needs to take place before the date. Right? Or you disagree with that?
Wait, say
before
that
you're dating anybody, if you're saying, I only want something casual, I think that you are not addressing the elephant in the room, which is, why don't you want something serious? Because everybody, I believe, does want the happy, loving, sharing, trusting sexual relationship with one person for the rest of their lives. I think everybody does want that. They just might not admit it, or they might not trust that it exists.
And that's hard though, right? Because you can't tell someone that you know something about them that they don't know about themselves.
That's my whole life. Who doesn't want to do that? Consider that a hobby. Yeah, people don't, and you are a therapist. People don't want to be diagnosed,
right?
Especially on a date.
Oh, right. If I'm not working, I'm off the clock. So,
but they know your skill set. So does that make it hard?
Absolutely. Therapists in the dating world will understand this. Yes, it is hard because people are like, we get the typical, are you reading my mind right now? Are you psychoanalyzing me right now? What am I thinking? Right? All of those.
Or they're like,
things.
You should have known. I'm like, I'm not a medium. I'm a therapist.
Right. Therapists talk about how we can't read each other's minds.
You just should have seen the signs. I'm like, no, I should know.
Yeah. So, that's the thing. Like, you have to trust yourself and learn and know that it can be something great, or if it's not, it could be a learning lesson.
Right. You have to find the value in it no matter what. Even if it's, halfway through the date that you probably don't want to do it again, rather than figure out how I can get out of this, figure out how you can learn something to take with you, whether either about yourself and how you handle the situation or about the other person. Just try and find one nugget of information that you can put in the backpack and take forward you in life. Then at some point you'll be like, oh my God, that date sucked, but you know what? I learned how to do this.
Yeah. Or,
I learned how to quickly file my nails in the bathroom.
Right. Or you learned more about what you want or don't want, right? Or what you like or don't like, It's all informing you, of different things. And with people with anxiety on first dates, I recommend really getting in touch with your body and the sensation. So like if someone has anxiety, grounding yourself is really helpful, whether it is holding the glass of ice water because it's really cold, that can ground you. Keeping yourself intact with the world around you. Helps you feel grounded, and that can help decrease that anxiety when you're on a date. And your
Take
date
the
doesn't.
cold water and put it against your forehead. That's probably a little much.
I was gonna say the date won't even know what you're doing, but if you take the water and put it on your forehead, he might
Splash
question
yourself.
it. Right. Right.
It's also hard for somebody in the moment to differentiate between excitement, nervousness, and anxiety. Because they're all sort of jittery, uncomfortable feelings, and you kind of have to decide, like, oh, this is a good feeling, this is a bad feeling. What is the stimuli that my brain, heart, soul telling to me? I'm trying to listen to what this person's saying, and I'm trying to also figure out what's going on in my own. That's a project.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's really, again, trusting yourself, but also understanding yourself. If you don't have insight into what's going on with you, you're not going to be able to help get yourself what you need. So really doing the work on yourself will help you for all of these first dates, right? If you're like, I'm, get anxious for first dates because I always really worry about being judged, well, then you have an angle as to how to help yourself when moving forward. If you get really anxious because you're overthinking about how you look or what you're wearing and all of that, maybe some more like body image stuff. Right? It's all the different angles, or maybe there could be so many different things.
Right. All of this requires thinking.
Yes.
And then we're trying not to overthink. And then I was a guest on some, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, the sports psychologist podcast recently. And he talks about how he tells his clients, he deals with a lot of athletes, to sort of practice visualization. Like, what is it like to score the winning basket? And I'm like, that's weird when you're feeling about your date, because that can get into a real weird area.
What do you mean?
He's like, oh, here I'm imagining her and I doing this. I mean, who knows where that can go?
Well, that sounds like
but
you're highlighting what the person hopes happens.
I agree, and so that's a fun. I mean, you have to get yourself in a people who can do meditation. I envy them tremendously. Putting yourself in a calm headspace. Most people put themselves in a headspace by having 3 glasses of wine while they're putting their makeup on. And then they show up in a weird state too, and then they're trying to hold it together. All of that is overthinking. I have to have 3 drinks because I'm going to be nervous, and then I don't want them to know this and this and this. All of that is overthinking. But as you said, there's a purpose to taking this mental inventory of a lot of things. That's the challenge. That's the balance.
I think that also makes someone human, though. Because a part of having anxiety, right, is that real or perceived threat, and you don't know how it's going to go. There is a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what you're going to think of them or what they're going to be thinking of you. So it's normal to feel anxious for a first date. Like, also telling yourself there's nothing wrong with me for feeling this way. I can understand why, and it's normal. Can help you sit with that anxiety in a way that's no longer overwhelming. And then you might, in turn, instead of, when you accept and acknowledge that those thoughts are there, it's no longer as anxiety provoking. You're actually accepting it, and you decrease the anxiety.
I think you're right on that. And women tend to get the reputation as the neurotic overthinkers. I think the men are just as bad, if not worse, because the biggest question, at least we're talking, after the break, we'll talk about relationship overthinking. But right now we're talking about early dating overthinking. Early on in the date, every second he's trying to figure out if she likes him. It's a lot easier for her to understand because he probably asked you out. Sorry, traditional gender roles. He probably complimented you. He probably was the one who pushed this cart forward. And to her, she's like, of course he likes me. I'm trying to assess if I like him. That's what's going on in her mind most of the time is, do I like him?
I think you're giving the women too much credit, because I think oftentimes women are also thinking, do they like me? Because most people in general view themselves in the way that they think someone else is viewing them.
He asked you out. He probably likes you.
Okay, yes, but that doesn't mean that they both aren't nervous for how the date could go.
Oh, I get it. But she's a lot of times doing the, do I even like him? He early on, if he's going to give you all this compliment, ask you out, all this kind of, he might get back like a thank you or a yes. And so he might not know for months whether you like him.
His anxiety with that is normal.
It is normal, but I'm saying that is a constant and tends. Then the man gets to get nervous and, oh my God, she didn't laugh, and then I told a stupid dad joke, and then it spirals out of control. So both sides, it should be fun. We're having nachos,
and where it gets down to stop overthinking and start trusting yourself.
And that is a big, big challenge. We're here with Ashley Gersh, who I trust enormously with this information. She's the host of Food for Thought. I got to take a quick break because I got to pay the bills for all these nachos around here, but we will be back right after this. We are back. We are talking about thinking, underthinking, overthinking, or maybe just the right amount of thinking. Let's talk about it in a relationship. Both people are constantly thinking a lot. Is this the relationship for me? Where are we going to go? How do they feel? Can I get them to do something different? Am I that same way? Am I happy? Am I not? And it is a constant circus of questions that we're asking of ourselves. How much of the overthinking can be let a little air out of the balloon and take the pressure off if we simply, when we think of something, say it out loud and ask the other person. How much overthinking is wondering when it could be solved by, hey, can I ask you something? Or are people afraid to even take that step?
You're asking, are people afraid to ask their partner to clarify the story that they're telling themselves in their head?
Probably. A feeling that they don't understand in a moment, an incident, a conversation where we take this tiny bit of stimuli and then we overthink it, and then it might overthink it to a dark place when it was probably like, oh yeah, I didn't hear you say that.
Absolutely. I think most people are afraid to do that because they're afraid that someone might clarify or give reassurance to their worst fears, to the worst case scenario thought that they have.
Right. Yeah, that's a dark way to look at it, but it's probably true. Our overthinking lends to under talking, and then it could go to the worst fears. Do you not like me? No, I don't. It's probably not going to be that, but if it is, wouldn't you want to know sooner or later? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You want to tell someone what you're thinking because our time is valuable. So you're saving yourself time if you know earlier on what the other person is thinking, where they stand, what they're looking for. If you ask them in advance, then you can set yourself up for better in the future by saving yourself time from someone who's going to hurt you anyway.
That's true. Case of emergency, break glass. I'm the type of person that every question that is going through her head, I would love it fired at me like one of those T-shirt cannons. Just boom, give me all the questions.
Open communication.
Yeah, I'll just ask. I want the questions. Ask them.
Yeah.
Some people I get like, can you just relax? Can we just have a conversation? Not everything is a discussion and not everything. But it's a balance too.
I like open communication too, though, and I think most people do. I think the people who don't are the ones who tend to isolate or withdraw or avoid hard conversations.
It's hard to date those people.
Very much so.
If you are one of those people, and it's a lot of people, and I'm not saying that's a fringe thing, that's probably the majority of people, you have to understand from the other person's point of view, if you're sitting in the corner and you are thinking of good things, bad things, but just questions in your head, and you're not probably going to be answering them for yourself. The person that is most likely to be able to answer them, you're not asking them. And so you're clouding both your brain and the relationship with this sort of fog of the unknown, which is probably not a good thing.
The overthinking takes over.
Yeah.
And you're not trusting yourself, right? You're not, the people who aren't saying something, right, or might be anxious for wanting that communication, or who are anxious about that communication, are the ones who aren't trusting themselves to make a decision after they receive the answer that is best for them, instead of people pleasing or staying longer than they should have when they know the relationship isn't good for them.
How can we learn to trust ourselves better? Is there exercises? Is there just a thought process besides therapy? The people, it's odd because people always talk about, I want to be able to be in a relationship with somebody I trust, and trust is really important. Almost nobody trusts themselves a lot of time.
Ooh.
How do we dial that up?
Slowly, but it's manageable and possible. So when you tell yourself that you are going to follow through on something and you don't, you're not building trust with yourself. It can be something small to start with, I'm gonna, something really small, like I'm going to brush my teeth this morning, right? Everyone has their own thing, and if you follow through on that one task, that can lead to then a bigger task, and just showing yourself that you can do the things that you want to be doing.
Yeah, that's the danger in, as we record this, we're getting sort of the latter half of 2022. So if you're listening to this in 2024, where have you been? Catch up. But if you're listening to this in late 2022, we're about to turn the page on the new year, which is filled with resolutions and things. And a lot of people are really good about that, which builds good habits. And then by Valentine's Day, those things have stopped.
Yes.
And then the negative reinforcement came in. Like, I committed to do that, which should build trust. I need to trust myself because I made a promise to myself to do this, do that, not do that, work out. And then when you stop doing that, you let yourself down, which leads to you not trusting yourself.
Absolutely. Trust with yourself is going to help you have a better relationship with others.
How do you improve trust in judgment?
Whose judgment? Your own
Your
judgment?
own. You're just like, oh my God, I keep picking the wrong people. And that's the thing that people have a hard time trusting. Like, I don't, part of me is just like, you can't trust your judgment, so pick the opposite. Like, just go in just stop thinking this is what I like, because you can't trust your judgment. But people want to be able to know when they ask out or say yes or go out with somebody or stay in a relationship that at least they're on the right path. And unsurety's fine. You're never going to be completely sure of anything. So you have to take these small steps to be like, you know what, I feel more comfortable. You're probably looking for comfort more than surety, I think. I don't know.
Assurance.
You don't want a relationship to feel like an old baggy sweater. You want it to still be exciting and all those kind of things and filled with thinking and laughter and sharing and all those kind of things. But I don't know how you can build trust when the questions, which is the thinking, keep cropping up.
Well, that's where you have to get curious and be willing to sit with the discomfort of your own choices and ask yourself, what is this behavior serving me? What function is this serving for me? Maybe you explore that on your own or in therapy, but really understanding, like, if I keep choosing emotionally unavailable people, what is this doing for me, right? How is this helping me? How is this hurting me? It's probably serving some sort of function for you in the sense of maybe it is confirming a core belief that you don't feel like you're worthy of love, or maybe it's that avoidance of vulnerability, because you don't have to be vulnerable as much if they're not actually available, because you know where it's going. Or maybe it's also a weird safety because you know how to manage that disappointment with someone who is unavailable.
The worthiness is a really good word. You bring that up. A lot of therapists talk about that, and a lot of people don't understand that they do not feel worthy of this partner, of this relationship, of love, of good feelings, having a good time, and that spirals out of time. Like, people need to, and it's not easy, flip the switch and be like, this is what I deserve. This is what I'm supposed to have. This is all these kind of things. But if you feel guilt, and not worthy gets into guilt and shame and neuroses and all of these things. Again, everything is this spiral that prevents us from just being present in the moment with another person.
Right. Absolutely. There are so many factors that can influence why someone is making the decisions that they're making. Maybe it was modeled for them and that's all they know. So that's what they think is right. If you don't get curious about yourself, you may never then develop that insight that you need to make a different decision.
Right. And if you are in a relationship, you can never stop being curious about your partner or the relationship, because hopefully both of those things are evolving, and hopefully both those things are evolving in a positive direction. You have to continue to learn those three things: yourself, your partner, and the relationship. Because if you're just like, we're good, we're fine, or whatever, you're going to wake up one day and like, wait, we don't laugh the way that we used to. We don't share. We don't communicate. What happened here?
Absolutely. And if one person is working on themselves in the relationship and the other person isn't, it can also be harder for that relationship to grow because it can be stunted. And if one person is only working on building that relationship and the other person isn't, it's not going to go anywhere. Both people have to want to invest in it.
Well, how do you deal with a relationship where one person wants to talk about everything and one person doesn't want to talk about anything?
People can find me at www.actionashley.com.
And there you have it. I mean, I agree, but then you have to be like, hey, you want to go talk to Action Ashley and go there? Like, that's hard too. Because it's only going to work if you have the proper mindset. Like, I was somebody who went to couples counseling once, and I'm like, I want to win, which is terrible.
You have choices. You always have a choice, right? It's, do you trust yourself? So the partner who wants to communicate, and then there's the partner who doesn't. For the person who wants to communicate, Have you asked yourself, do they know this is what I'm thinking? First of all, have you expressed it? If you have expressed it and they are still not changing, what is the least that you're willing to accept in that relationship? Mm-hmm. And do you trust yourself to sit with the pain of an ending or being alone while you wait to find someone who is more of the right fit?
Mm-hmm. And people are afraid to rock the boat in the relationship too early. So, for example, we're going out on a date, and you're like, "What do you like to do on the weekends?" And I say something like, "Oh, I don't know. I like to play poker with my friends on Friday night." And you're like, "Ooh," but you don't say anything because it's like you can't say it's our first date. You can't be like, "Well, you can't do that with me anymore." And you don't say anything until you get to the point where you're comfortable in the relationship, and then you're like, "Hey, can we go to Sarah's on Friday night?" And you're like, "No, I play poker on Friday night." And then you suddenly flip out, and he's like, "She's crazy. She knew from the first date I play poker." But that's the challenge, because you can't really say anything other than frame it in positivity. Whereas when the guy says, "I like to play poker or on Friday nights," and you say, "There are so many more fun things you could do with me on Friday night than play poker," and then suddenly there's no more poker. Everything is about framing. So everybody agrees, I think, in the relationship space that compromise is a good thing. I think negotiation is also a good thing.
I was going to go bring it back to thinking also, right? The overthinking or the thinking. The couple scenario example that you just gave, each partner there probably has their own perspective of how they think things should be done. The woman might be thinking on Friday nights, we should be, doing X, Y, and Z. And the guy might be thinking, well, on Fridays, I should be playing poker, right? So they're each coming to this with their own perspective, right? Of like shoulds, like it should be this. But I don't like the word should, because everyone has, you have to figure out what works for you.
And each other.
Right.
Because some people be like, "I love that he has his own thing."
Right. I meant like there's no one way to just do something. And in relationships, there's lots of compromise.
I think people would love to know there's one way to do something, but you're right. I mean, relationships are snowflakes, and it is hard. Compromise is good, but I think negotiation, like I brought that up, if two people, one doesn't want to go ask a question, one doesn't want to seek, it's like, if I do this, will you do this? Mm-hmm. And I think there's some value in that, but that's hard too.
It's hard. I think like the example you gave, like if the woman you said, freaks out later or, really gets angry or upset, it might be stemming from a deeper rooted issue, right? Of not feeling heard or validated in the relationship, right? Maybe for her, what she's saying is, I need to be loved this way. I need to be seen this way. And that is really what's not being communicated.
And he needs to do a better job on not just Saturday night, but the other 6 nights of the week, where she's like, I'm so comfortable, have fun, win money, bring home poker, or something like that.
Right.
Usually the resistance or the hesitance is somehow, it's like, he's choosing that over me. What does he find in that I don't have? And again, overthinking all of it when it's probably just habit. Mm-hmm. It's what he knows. It's comfortable. It's what I've been doing for 15 years. It's a regular thing. And,
Right. I think a strong relationship is, can you be open to receiving like feedback from your partner, open to receiving their suggestions?
Yes. But I think the flip side to that is, in what package are those suggestions and feedback delivered?
Of course, delivery is important.
And that is, I think everybody will take, and it's not even like, can I give you constructive criticism? That's not good either. It's like how do I deliver the message? I brought this up on a podcast a couple weeks ago. Don't say, don't wear that. Say, oh my God, you look so good in that. And that's the same message. You're going to get what you want. It's about positivity. And some people in the moment, because we don't think about that enough, we don't think about how we're delivering the message. We only think about, here's what I want to get out and here's what I want to get back. How you deliver this nice little bouquet of criticism or suggestion totally can change the outcome and the feedback to that.
Absolutely. Delivery matters. Tone of voice matters. But the only thing that you can control is yourself. So what you can do is you can also teach people how to treat you. If your partner says it in a way that is offensive or hurts your feelings, you can let them know, because that's the only part of that situation that you can control.
Well, how do you do that? Give me an example of that. Oh my God, it takes you so long to get ready. How would I say that? Honey, can you hurry it up? That's not good either.
No. So you're saying...
I'm saying, how do you...
if the wife or the partner or the woman, the female in the relationship is saying, you're taking so long, you're such a slob, like, why are you doing this? We have to go.
Something like that.
And then you're wanting to know, how does the man then say to her?
How do you deliver it or how you receive it in a way that...
Yeah.
That's the challenge. Some people wait too late to speak up and then it explodes.
Well, I think, first of all, coming back to your values, if you value respectful communication and your intention, that's going to come across. But in therapy, we also call them I statements, right? So I felt hurt when you yelled at me to get my shit together. I'd prefer next time you let me know how this is really important to you, and I will do a better job of making sure I'm on time.
You're taking ownership of it.
Because then the person is less defensive on the receiving end instead of just, well, you yelled at me, you did this, you're wrong for speaking to me like that.
Right. So you're not speaking at them.
Yeah.
You're speaking to them, and you're saying, here's how I felt about something that you did versus just that you did.
Exactly.
I like that. See, that kind of things you'll learn in therapy, everybody.
Yes.
It's not so bad. You really do rewire a lot of the way you look at things and the way you think about things. And I'm not saying therapy is going to make you think less. It's just going to make you think differently. And sometimes that's the thing. You just got to kind of pivot 45 degrees, and suddenly it's like you're going to look at yourself and how you did things, and maybe you can look back, X amount of years, and then just blame your parents.
Right, bring it all back to psychodynamic.
Exactly.
Childhood
I was
stuff.
raised terribly.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is where you can stop overthinking and start trusting yourself. Right? Because if you were to take yourself out of that scenario and you were like, my partner would speak to that if it was anyone that was in the closet with us, right? Not just me, because that's how they respond. You depersonalize it. It's not taken as personally.
Right.
And you realize I can trust myself with how I choose to respond to this situation, because that's the only thing that I can control.
Right. And it's a subtle way. It's not saying, don't take this personally. If somebody says, don't take this personally, you're absolutely going to take it personally. And you should. But it's subtle.
Things are personal, right? That is a personal dynamic. And yet we still can choose how we engage with the situation.
Yeah. What is something that you think we don't think about enough? Is there something that we do underthink? We tend to overthink everything. Is the thing that you're like, I wish people thought about this more when they did this? Is it just automatic? Is it the other person's feelings, the other person's perspective, how this comes off?
That's a great question. I think as a therapist, I just naturally have a high tolerance for hard conversations. So I myself might already think of these things. So as a general question, it's different than maybe what would I think for myself? But what do people not think enough about? I think people don't think enough about that a lot of people's behaviors are a reflection of them.
Yeah. So they shouldn't take it so personally.
Right. I think a lot of people's responses are about the other person, right, who's reacting, and it's not about oh, I'm not good enough, that's why they responded to me this way.
You're right. I tell the guys this all the time. You might ask her out and she might say no, and it might be just her day, or she's busy, or she paid no attention. It might have absolutely nothing to do with you. People take this rejection so personal and immediate. She had to get to the bank, she didn't want to talk in this moment, and it happened another moment in time. It's not personal.
Absolutely.
It wasn't significant enough to her in that moment that it just wasn't a priority. That's a really good one that you came up with. People don't think enough. And for me, I think people don't think enough about how the other person perceives it, whether it's a situation or a comment. We don't put ourselves in other people's shoes enough because, to our defense, we don't understand ourselves. So to try and role play and be the other person, but at least they have to understand that there may be an alternative perspective or interpretation of a word, a moment, and anything.
I think people who are super empathetic and might have had traumatic histories maybe do that too much because they've learned how to manage themselves, right? And maybe unsettling situations, right? If they can perceive how the other person is feeling, they can protect themselves.
Yeah.
But they can work on trusting their own perspective of the situation more.
Yeah, and the danger in doing that is always well, they have a different perspective. They must be right. And don't stand up enough for your own feelings in a moment. That's dangerous too.
Right.
I mean, all this is challenging, with two brains and putting them together in anything. I mean, it's amazing we even get a dessert menu.
All the overthinking, right? From the appetizers to the entree to the dessert and drinks.
Right. I want dessert, but what is he going to think if I order it? What is she going to
Order
think
the
if I even
dessert.
suggest
If
it?
he
Order.
judges you for ordering
Always
food,
offer.
not your guy.
Always order it. She definitely wants a bite.
Yes.
Always.
That was the whole thing.
All right, I'm going to let you plug your podcast in a second, but something that I gave you warning about, which I normally don't do, on this podcast, the first time somebody comes on, we play something called Worst Date or First Date. So you either have to give us the absolute worst date you've ever had or the best first date you've ever gone on, your choice.
And I'm actually way more excited to talk about this than when you first asked me because my mind just went blank.
You didn't think about it enough. Yeah.
But I thought of something that was actually really funny. So in high school, I was dating this guy, and in high school dates end up, because you don't have as much freedom as you do as an adult, financially and other things. Mm-hmm. So in high school, dating or talking to someone ends up, at least in this situation, looking like meetups. So this guy and I met up at a park, and we are now in his car, in his Range Rover, and all of a sudden, we're making out, and there is a tap on the window. And we look over, and it's a policeman.
Oh.
And we're like, what? So this date ends up with the policeman telling us to get out of the car and call our parents.
Oh, no.
I have never, I was just like, what?
And tell them you were making out in a car?
Honestly, I just kept thinking to myself, why? Like, this guy seems like a jerk of a cop right now. Like, we are high school kids, on our like meetup date.
Sharing
whatever.
a moment in a Range Rover.
That song by the Chainsmokers, Closer?
Yeah.
That's like backseat, I can play it if you want. Every time I think about that situation, it's just so random.
Wait, you were making out in the back seat? That's a little more significant. Backseat making out is much different than front seat making out.
Well, I don't kiss and tell, so I won't disclose which one we were.
There's a difference. Sorry.
And so
You're
we get out of the car.
Back. Yeah.
We get out of the car, and now we are standing in front of this police officer. And he's like, call your parents. So I'm like, what? Okay. So I, at that age, I'm like, I do what the authority tells me to do. Like, I'm scared. Like, what is happening? Call my mom. I don't even remember in the moment exactly what I told her. But she was just hysterical laughing, and I drove myself home. I get home, I'm with my mom, dad, and sister now, and we're all just hysterical laughing about what just happened. Thank God I wasn't in any real trouble.
What happened to him?
I don't know. I don't know.
Did he call too, or you don't even know?
See, let's talk about overthinking for a second.
Yeah.
So my mind goes to, did he actually call his mom? Did he call his friend? Like, I don't know, because I thought to myself, the cop actually could have had no idea who I chose to click in that moment, but I did what he told me.
Oh, that's true.
So I honestly, to this day, still don't know.
I think that's a good story. Damn cop.
Right,
Couple
damn
of kids
cop.
making out in the.
Let us be.
Let us get in the back seat in high school. All right, that was good. All right, tell everybody about your podcast and how they can find your podcast.
My podcast is Food for Thought with Ashley Gersh, and you can find it on all major streaming platforms.
What do you talk about on Food for Thought?
I give people lots of things to digest and marinate. And so we talk about how someone went through their own adversity, and that gives people food for thought with hope and how to think about that themselves.
There you go. You serve it up with a side of hope.
Yes.
This was fun. This wasn't so bad, right?
Absolutely.
This
was fun.
Somebody.
I hope so.
As far as us, as always, like, share, follow, and please review this podcast and Food for Thought. Your reviews mean a lot in the podcasting ecosystem. Shoot us an email, greatlovedebate@gmail.com if you have questions, thoughts, food for thought,
Yes.
comments, or anything else. We are doing a fresh batch of year-end listener letters coming up. Probably not the next episode, in the next 2 episodes. So send those in. It is our annual holiday spectacular. So you send in your letters about what you are overthinking, underthinking, or concerned about this upcoming holiday season. I would say go to greatlovedebate.com and check out our live tour schedule. But as I said last week, I'm done for the year. You guys are miserable. We're going to start fresh in the new year. I will have a fresh batch of shows. I think I'm doing a show in Croatia. That one has been ruminating a long, long time. And we're still doing the Great Love Debate. So we're still doing the cruise. So details coming, greatlovedebate.com. Because as always, at the Great Love Debate, we never stop making love. See you next time.